Hey everybody, I'm just making this video to go over Tracer talents and how I feel about them now. I kind of talked about this before in my post-rework Tracer video that I did like right after the rework hit, maybe like a week or two after the rework hit, and it was like 28 minutes long, so, I know a lot of people didn't watch that whole thing. Hopefully this would be a little bit more brief and a little bit more focused and also a little bit more well-informed. Now that we've had a little bit of time to play it out, I'm really liking where I'm at with Tracer right now. Just this season in ranked, I've got a 76% win rate. And then we can go look at my last season win rate, which was also post-rework for a little bit. I only played her one time on this account, on that account this season. It seems good. But last season, 76% as well. So I feel like I've been doing pretty well in Master Plus, currently Grandmaster right now with Tracer. And I've really come to solidify a few opinions that I've had. This is going to be very, very similar to what I expressed in the Tracer rework video, but I believe that these opinions have changed a little bit, and they're a little bit more fleshed out, and they have more backing them up now. So let's get right into it. At level 1 here, I'm still of the opinion that parting gifts just isn't good. I've talked to a few people. My friend Cascon, who's a pretty good Tracer, he kind of likes it. He thinks it's pickable in certain scenarios. Maybe I could test it more, but as it stands, I think that it's a lot of effort for not that much return, and it has a lot of the same problems that it has before. I did a video about why I don't like Parting Gift and why I thought it was a bad level 4 talent before. I still think that all the same stuff applies now. So I think that most of the time 1-2 punch is really, really good. I think it's super, super good, unless you kind of just need to hang back all draft. Or all game, sorry, not all draft. Like if you need to spend the game just kind of hanging back, staying far away, getting auto attack value, which is very often the case when you're playing against short range CC characters like Uther and Varian. When you're up against those, then you won't really be able to get chain melee value. So a lot of the times you're going to want to go Tracer rounds instead in that scenario. And that gives you a little bit extra auto attack range, so then you can play a little bit further away, and then so then that gives you a lot more safety in that regard, when 1-2 punch would kind of do nothing for you if you're into like Uther, you're into Varian, that kind of thing. Then at level 4, you've got Pulse Generator. I still, like I said when I made that video, that I thought Pulse Generator was going to be insane. Like I looked at this and I was like, this talent is going to be nuts. I think that it's pretty much required after we lost bullet time in order to get some of that lost mobility back. And I still absolutely think that's the case. Is that a health pack actually got buffed? And I thought it was pickable sometimes pre-rework, and it's only better now strictly compared to its old self. But it's competing against something that, in my opinion, is just like you need to pick this 99% of the time, or like you're just hamstringing yourself. I could see like some situations later down the line if you were going like Sticky Bomb or Quantum Spike, particularly Sticky Bomb, where you could maybe argue going for health pack, but that's like such a niche scenario that can be talked about in its own video. Basically, I think it's fine to consider Pulse Generator just like an always pick. At level 7, let me see here. At level 7, I still think Focus Fire is just not worth. Some people ask me, Focus Fire, it scales off of plus attack damage. Does that mean it's better than Locked and Loaded? Because if you have a bunch of untouchable stacks, it gives more damage than Locked and Loaded? No. Because it's less damage for at least like a good like 6 levels, and until you get some stacks. And even then, the damage is inconsistent. It doesn't bounce with Ricochet. It's just not good. Focus Fire is not good. Whereas Sleight of Hand and Locked and Loaded, Sleight of Hand, I used to say you just don't pick it unless you're like new to Tracer or just learning her pre-rework. Now I think it's a lot better because Tracer's kit is a lot more about just getting a lot of pulse bombs out and using those with Pulse Generator to generate self-heal, generate mobility. So I think that Sleight of Hand is actually very, very pickable now, and I'm not really sold on it being objectively worse than Locked and Loaded. I'm not really sure which is better between the two. I lean towards Locked and Loaded, but I honestly think you can pick either of these and be perfectly fine. Level 10, just like with level 4, I think that outside of hyper-specific niche scenarios, you're going pulse rounds. Like maybe if you're in a coordinated team and you're like really just instantly detonating people, you could go Quantum Spike, I could see it. Or if you're setting your team up for CC like Sulfur Smash with Sticky Bomb, I could see it. These are, again, coordinated situations, not going to matter for the vast majority of players, and even in coordinated situations are only a very tiny percentage of those games. So again, you can basically consider pulse rounds an always pick for the same reason. Going into 13, I thought Telefrag, when we were new to the rework, was actually going to be useful, but it hasn't really panned out. It turns out that it's not a lot of damage. The knockback isn't super useful. If the knockback was at your cast rather than at your arrival location, it could maybe be used as like a boss control tool, especially if it knocked back further, but like the knockback isn't really where you want it to be. It's not a lot of knockback, it's not a lot of damage, and also just you don't really need the recall CDR as much now that recall is 20 seconds instead of 30 seconds. Recall takes you out of the fight for longer now. It used to take you out of the fight for, I want to say, 0.75 seconds. Now it takes you out of the fight for 1.25 seconds. So recalling means you lose a lot of DPS, and the enemy team has way more time to play around it and to kill you out of your recall. So recalling a lot can actually be to your detriment in some really strong ways now, even with Telefrag. So Telefrag doesn't get that much value. It's very consistently underperformed as a talent for that reason. I basically consider it a never pick at the moment. It does synergize with Ricochet, like the Ricochet bounce attacks trigger the cooldown reduction and recall, but again, I just don't think that that's super impactful to have recall up that often compared to the other options. So Untouchable is super, super good if you can just get the takedowns for it, which in like random Storm League games is a pretty reliable bet, and it synergizes super hard with Ricochet, and even with heavy-handed. Like that is going to be a really good talent in a lot of your games. Jumper, on the other hand, gives you value, like the full value of the talent right away, and gives you a lot of extra mobility, which can really, really help you if you're going auto-attack build, because then you can abuse Ricochet harder by just kiting around better and better. So, Jumper and Untouchable, I think Jumper, like, you can go Untouchable in greedy games, straight up. But you can also go Jumper in games where you're going to be looking for auto-attack value, or just games where you can't really count on getting those takedowns. Like in coordinated games, I think Jumper really goes up in relative value compared to Untouchable. But I pick either of these, depending on the game. 16, Bullet Spray is still garbage, if you ask me. I see nearly no reason to pick this talent ever. Basically, like, if you want spread damage, you'll very often want Ricochet. If you want burst onto one target, you'll want heavy-handed. You don't really ever need wave clear on Tracer at 16. It kind of just doesn't happen. If it was like a big problem, then either like you should have drafted differently, or you would have lost by then or something. It's almost never relevant, because like it has a few bonuses, you know, like Bullet Spray is good for guaranteeing that your melee always hits the correct target. So for burst and for doing spread damage. And again, it gets beaten out on burst by heavy-handed, and it gets beaten out on spread damage by Ricochet. I could maybe see, if you were going like Maev and like a full AoE team, you clump them all with Maev, you've got 1-2 punch, and you just double AoE melee? That could maybe work, but that's like such a specific scenario. Outside of that, I don't think this is pickable. Heavy-handed is really good into high armor targets. It's really good when you want to burst people. It's really good with 1-2 punch because you get insane uptime on it, 12 seconds straight of minus 15 armor. That's really good. Ricochet is just generally, I think in games, like in a lot of uncoordinated games, is going to be insane. I pick between these two talents a lot, depending on what I'm trying to do. Am I trying to blow up individual targets and shred through their armor, especially like Garrosh's cry when you pick this talent. But Ricochet also gives you a lot of extra auto attack damage. So just, it's really the two of these get a lot of value depending on the game. And then at 20, I called right off the bat when the rework happened, Total Recall and Composition B still total garbage. I think that's the case still. Total Recall, I was like, maybe with Telefrag, I tried it out for a little bit. I was like, maybe you can make it work. No, not good at all. And Composition B, still terrible, still deals almost no damage, and now Pulse Bomb does even less damage, so now Composition B does almost nothing at all. And you might be like, oh, what about Sticky Bomb? Like, no, not worth. Chrono Triggers, I thought would be decent if you were to go like a full auto attack build with like Tracer rounds and a Jumper and a Ricochet. That's not the case. That doesn't really work as consistently as you would want to. It's actually kind of hard to get the timing exactly down, and it incentivizes you to use blinks in ways you might not particularly want to. I think that if you're just terrible with using Get Stuffed, you might get more value out of it. But for anybody who's even decent with it, I would probably just recommend you go Get Stuffed. The extra bomb charge alone is worth a lot in conjunction with Pulse Generator. Getting more bombs out is super, super useful. Get Stuffed still has a million different uses like Peel and Burst and Interrupts and anything in between. So you've got a lot of options there. I'm just now realizing as I go back through that I never talked about leeching rounds. This sounds still garbage. Like, you are basically never going to have a situation where you're sitting on a bunch of blink charges, but you also need lifesteal. You're typically going to be using blinks to mitigate the amount of damage that you're taking. This is almost never useful. I think that you can consider this pretty safely and never pick. And so as it stands, that's my opinion on talents. And so again, I'm going to run through it one more time, just super quick. 1-2 puncher tracer rounds at 1, always pick pulse generator at 4, 7 sleight of hand or locked and loaded, 10 always pulse rounds, 13 untouchable or jumper, 16 heavy-handed or ricochet, and 20 always gets stuffed. Maybe chrono triggers in certain situations, but not like always get stuffed, let's be real. And that's where I stand on these well after the rework. Thanks for watching. Try this stuff out, and let me know how it goes.